What's going on YouTube? Listen up, young elder gang. This is billionaire Ted Strokes at you with another banger. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video, fam. I hope this video get at least 100,000 likes. In this video, you will find history, definitions, scripture, information, and best of all, what we Americans have been deprived of from the beginning, the truth. Keep in mind this content used in this video is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. We will give you the total truth, as we best understand it today. Be sure to hit that like button, young elder gang. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Hit that bell, and don't forget to check back with us every day for new content. What if I told you our education system is a pawn in a global takeover? Intrigued? Let's dive in. Imagine universities turned into breeding grounds for obedience, not intellect. The Black Hand elite aims to emasculate higher education. Their strategy? Re-educate universities with secret agendas, ensuring every professor dances to their tune. No more freedom of instruction, no more independent thought. Classicism, ancient history, gone. Replaced with tailored programs designed to produce compliant citizens who worship their rulers. Students will be spoon-fed a curated history, erasing any inconvenient truths. Only a select few will learn about politics, handpicked for their loyalty. The rest? They'll be taught to follow, not to think. Schools will become echo chambers of propaganda, molding minds to support their regime. The aim? A society where the youth are obedient, loving their rulers as the ultimate authority. It's a chilling vision of control. Stay alert, folks. Knowledge is power, and the Black Hand elite knows it all too well. Monopolies. Upon them depend the fortunes of the masses, taking of the land out of the hands of the aristocracy, trade, industry, and speculation, luxury, rise of wages and increase of price in the articles of primary necessity, anarchism and drunkenness. We shall keep them low and high, secret meaning of the propaganda of economic theories. We shall soon begin to establish huge monopolies, reservoirs of colossal riches, upon which even large fortunes of the masses will depend to such an extent that they will go to the bottom together with the credit of the states on the day after the political smash. You gentlemen here now who are economists, just strike an estimate of the significance of this combination. In every possible way, we must develop the significance of our supergovernment by representing it as the protector and benefactor of all those who voluntarily submit to us. The aristocracy of the masses as a political force is dead. We need not take it into account, but as landed proprietors, they can still be harmful to us from the fact that they are self-sufficing in the resources upon which they live. It is essential, therefore, for us at whatever cost to deprive them of their land. This object will be best attained by increasing the burdens upon landed property, in loading lands with debts. These measures will check landholding and keep it in a state of humble and unconditional submission. The aristocrats of the masses, being hereditarily incapable of contenting themselves with little, will rapidly burn up and fizzle out. At the same time, we must intensively patronize trade and industry, but first and foremost, speculation, the part played by which is to provide a counterpoise to industry. The absence of speculative industry will multiply capital in private hands, and will serve to restore agriculture by freeing the land from indebtedness to the land banks. What we want is that industry should drain off from the land both labor and capital, and by means of speculation transfer into our hands all the money of the world, and thereby throw all the masses into the ranks of the proletariat. Then the masses will bow down before us, if for no other reason but to get the right to exist. To complete the ruin of the industry of the masses, we shall bring to the assistance of speculation the luxury which we have developed among the masses, that greedy demand for luxury which is swallowing up everything. We shall raise the rate of wages, which, however, will not bring any advantage to the workers, for at the same time, we shall produce a rise in prices of the first necessaries of life, alleging that it arises from the decline of agriculture and cattle breeding. We shall further undermine artfully and deeply sources of production by accustoming the workers to anarchy and to drunkenness, and side by side, therewith taking all measure to extirpate from the face of the earth all the educated forces of the masses. In order that the true meaning of things may not strike the masses before the proper time, we shall mask it under an alleged ardent desire to serve the working classes and the great principles of political economy about which our economic theories are carrying on an energetic propaganda. Object of the intensification of armaments, ferments, discords, and hostility all over the world. Checking the opposition of the masses by wars and by a universal war. Secrecy means success in the political, the press and public opinion, the guns of America, China, and Japan. The intensification of armaments, the increase of police forces, are all essential for the completion of the aforementioned plans. What we have to get at is that there should be in all the states of the world, besides ourselves, only the masses of the proletariat, a few millionaires devoted to our interests, police, and soldiers. Throughout all Europe, and by means of relations with Europe, in other continents also, we must create ferments, discords, and hostility. Therein we gain a double advantage. In the first place, we keep in check all countries, for they well know that we have the power whenever we like to create disorders or to restore order. All these countries are accustomed to see in us an indispensable force of coercion. In the second place, by our intrigues we shall tangle up all the threads which we have stretched into the cabinets of all states by means of the political, by economic treaties, or loan obligations. In order to succeed in this, we must use great cunning and penetration during negotiations and agreements, but as regards what is called the official language. We shall keep to the opposite tactics and assume the mask of honesty and compliancy. In this way, the peoples and governments of the masses, whom we have taught to look only at the outside of whatever we present to their notice, will still continue to accept us as the benefactors and saviors of the human race. We must be in a position to respond to every act of opposition by war with the neighbors of that country which dares to oppose us. But if these neighbors should also venture to stand collectively together against us, then we must offer resistance by a universal war. The principal factor of success in the political is the secrecy of its undertakings. The word should not agree with the deeds of the diplomat. We must compel the governments of the masses to take action in the direction favored by our widely conceived plan, already approaching the desired consummation, by what we shall represent as public opinion, secretly prompted by us through the means of that so-called great power, the press, which, with a few exceptions that may be disregarded, is already entirely in our hands. In a word, to sum up our system of keeping the governments of the masses in Europe in check, we shall show our strength to one of them by terrorist attempts, and to all, if we allow the possibility of a general rising against us, we shall respond with the guns of America or China or Japan. Ambiguous employment of juridical rights, assistance of the Masonic Directorate, special schools and super-educational training, economists and millionaires, to whom to entrust responsible posts in the government. We must arm ourselves with all the weapons which our opponents might employ against us. We must search out in the very finest shades of expression and the knotty points of the lexicon of law justification for those cases where we shall have to pronounce judgments that might appear abnormally audacious and unjust, for it is important that these resolutions should be set forth in expressions that shall seem to be the most exalted moral principles cast into legal form. Our directorate must surround itself with all these forces of civilization among which it will have to work. It will surround itself with publicists, practical jurists, administrators, diplomats, and finally, with persons prepared by a special super-educational training in our special schools. These persons will have cognizance of all the secrets of the social structure. They will know all the languages that can be made up by political alphabets and words. They will be made acquainted with the whole underside of human nature, with all its sensitive chords on which they will have to play. These chords are the cast of mind of the masses, their tendencies, shortcomings, vices, and qualities, the particularities of classes and conditions. Needless to say that the talented assistants of authority, of whom I speak, will be taken not from among the masses, who are accustomed to perform their administrative work without giving themselves the trouble to think what its aim is and never consider what it is needed for. The administrators of the masses sign papers without reading them, and they serve either for mercenary reasons or from ambition. We shall surround our government with a whole world of economists. That is the reason why economic sciences form the principal subject of the teaching given to the Jews, the original Black Hand. Around us again will be a whole constellation of bankers, industrialists, capitalists, and, the main thing, millionaires, because in substance everything will be settled by the question of figures. For a time, until there will no longer be any risk in entrusting responsible posts in our states to our brother Jews, we shall put them in the hands of persons whose past and reputation are such that between them and the people lies an abyss. Persons who, in case of disobedience to our instructions, must face criminal charges or disappear. This in order to make them defend our interests to their last gasp. Application of Masonic principles in the matter of re-educating the peoples. Masonic watchword, meaning of anti-Semitism. Dictatorship of Masonry, terror. Who are the servants of Masonry? Meaning of the clear-sighted and the blind forces of the masses states. Communion between authority and mob, license of liberalism, seizure of education and training, false theories, interpretation of laws, the undergrounds, metropolitans. In applying our principles, let attention be paid to the character of the people in whose country you live and act. A general, identical application of them until such time as the people shall have been re-educated to our pattern cannot have success. But by approaching their application cautiously, you will see that not a decade will pass before the most stubborn character will change, and we shall add a new people to the ranks of those already subdued by us. The words of the liberal, which are in effect the words of our Masonic watchword, namely liberty, equality, fraternity, will, when we come into our kingdom, be changed by us into words no longer of a watchword, but only air expression of idealism, namely into the right of liberty, the duty of equality, the ideal of brotherhood. That is how we shall put it, and so we shall catch the bull by the horns. De facto, we have already wiped out every kind of rule except our own, although de jure there still remain a good many of them. Nowadays, if any states raise a protest against us, it is only pro forma at our discretion and by our direction, for their anti-Semitism is indispensable to us for the management of our lesser brethren. I will not enter into further explanations, for this matter has formed the subject of repeated discussions amongst us. For us, there are no checks to limit the range of our activity. Our supergovernment subsists in extra-legal conditions which are described in the accepted terminology by the energetic and forcible word, dictatorship. I am in a position to tell you with a clear conscience that at the proper time we, the lawgivers, shall execute judgment and sentence, we shall slay and we shall spare. We, as head of all our troops, are mounted on the steed of the leader. We rule by force of will, because in our hands are the fragments of a once powerful party, now vanquished by us. And the weapons in our hands are limitless ambitions, burning greediness, merciless vengeance, hatreds and malice. It is from us that the all-engulfing terror proceeds. We have in our service persons of all opinions, of all doctrines, restaurating monarchists, demagogues, socialists, communists, and utopian dreamers of every kind. We have harnessed them all to the task. Each one of them on his own account is boring away at the last remnants of authority, is striving to overthrow all established form of order. By these acts, all states are in torture. They exhort to tranquility, are ready to sacrifice everything for peace. But we will not give them peace until they openly acknowledge our international supergovernment, and with submissiveness. The people have raised a howl about the necessity of settling the question of socialism by way of an international agreement. Division into fractional parties has given them into our hands, for in order to carry on a contested struggle, one must have money, and the money is all in our hands. We might have reason to apprehend a union between the clear-sighted force of the Goy kings on their thrones and the blind force of the Goy mobs, but we have taken all the needful measures against any such possibility. Between the one and the other force we have erected a bulwark in the shape of a mutual terror between them. In this way the blind force of the people remains our support, and we only shall provide them with a leader and of course direct them along the road that leads to our goal. In order that the hand of the blind mob may not free itself from our guiding hand, we must every now and then enter into close communion with it, if not actually in person, at any rate through some of the most trusty of our brethren. When we are acknowledged as the only authority, we shall discuss with the people personally on the marketplaces, and we shall instruct them on questions of the political in such wise as may turn them in the direction that suits us. Who is going to verify what is taught in the village schools? But what an envoy of the government or a king on his throne himself may say cannot but become immediately known to the whole state, for it will be spread abroad by the voice of the people. In order not to annihilate the institutions of the Goyim before it is time, we have touched them with craft and delicacy, and have taken hold of the ends of the springs which move their mechanism. These springs lay in a strict but just sense of order. We have replaced them by the chaotic license of liberalism. We have got our hands into the administration of the law, into the conduct of elections, into the press, into liberty of the person, but principally into education and training as being the cornerstones of a free existence. We have fooled, bemused, and corrupted the youth of the masses by rearing them in principles and theories which are known to us to be false, although it is by us that they have been inculcated. Above the existing laws without substantially altering them and by merely twisting them into contradictions of interpretations, we have erected something grandiose in the way of results. These results found expression first in the fact that the interpretations masked the laws. Afterwards, they entirely hid them from the eyes of the governments owing to the impossibility of making anything out of the tangled web of legislation. This is the origin of the theory, of course, of arbitration. You may say that the masses will rise upon us, arms in hand, if they guess what is going on before the time comes. But in the West we have against this a maneuver of such appalling terror that the very stoutest hearts quail, the undergrounds, metropolitanes, those subterranean corridors which before the time comes will be driven under all the capitals, and from whence those capitals will be blown into the air with all their organizations and archives, the outside appearances in the political, the genius of rascality, what is promised by a Masonic coup d'etat, universal suffrage, self-importance, leaders of Masonry, the genius who is guide of Masonry, institutions and their functions, the poison of liberalism, Constitution, a school of party discords, era of republics, presidents, the puppets of Masonry. You must be a Mason to be president. Responsibility of presidents, Panama. Part played by Chamber of Deputies and President. Masonry, the legislative force, new Republican Constitution, transition to Masonic despotism, moment for the proclamation of the Lord of all the world, inoculation of diseases and other wiles of Masonry. Today I begin with a repetition of what I said before. And I beg you to bear in mind that governments and peoples are content in the political with outside appearances, and how indeed are the masses to perceive the underlying meaning of things when their representatives give the best of their energies to enjoying themselves. For our policy, it is of the greatest importance to take cognizance of this detail. It will be of assistance to us when we come to consider the division of authority, freedom of speech, of the press, of religion, faith, of the law of association, of equality before the law, of the inviolability of property, of the dwelling of taxation, the idea of concealed taxes, of the reflex force of the laws. All these questions are such as ought not to be touched upon directly and openly before the people. In cases where it is indispensable to touch upon them, they must not be categorically named. It must merely be declared without detailed exposition that the principles of contemporary law are acknowledged by us. The reason of keeping silence in this respect is that by not naming a principle, we leave ourselves freedom of action to drop this or that out of it without attracting notice. If they were all categorically named, they would all appear to have been already given. The mob cherishes a special affection and respect for the geniuses of political power and accepts all their deeds of violence with the admiring response, "Rascally, well, yes, it is rascally, but it's clever. A trick, if you like, but how craftily played, how magnificently done, what impudent audacity." We count upon attracting all nations to the task of erecting the new fundamental structure, the project for which has been drawn up by us. This is why, before everything, it is indispensable for us to arm ourselves and to store up in ourselves that absolutely reckless audacity and irresistible might of the spirit which in the person of our active workers will break down all hindrances on our way. When we have accomplished our coup d'etat, we shall say then to the various peoples, everything has gone terribly badly. All have been worn out with sufferings. We are destroying the causes of your torment, nationalities, frontiers, differences of coinages. You are at liberty, of course, to pronounce sentence upon us, but can it possibly be a just one if it is confirmed by you before you make any trial of what we are offering you? Then will the mob exalt us and bear us up in their hands in a unanimous triumph of hopes and expectations, voting, which we have made the instrument which will set us on the throne of the world, by teaching even the very smallest units of members of the human race to vote by means of meetings and agreements by groups, will then have served its purposes and will play its part then, for the last time, by a unanimity of desire to make close acquaintance with us before condemning us. To secure this, we must have everybody vote without distinction of classes and qualifications in order to establish an absolute majority, which cannot be got from the educated, propertied classes. In this way, by inculcating in all a sense of self-importance. We shall destroy among the masses the importance of the family and its educational value, and remove the possibility of individual minds splitting off, for the mob, handled by us, will not let them come to the front, nor even give them a hearing. It is accustomed to listen to us only who pay it for obedience and attention. In this way, we shall create a blind, mighty force, which will never be in a position to move in any direction without the guidance of our agents set at its head by us as leaders of the mob. The people will submit to this regime because it will know that upon these leaders will depend its earnings, gratifications, and the receipt of all kinds of benefits. A scheme of government should come ready-made from one brain because it will never be clinched firmly if it is allowed to be split into fractional parts in the minds of many. It is allowable, therefore, for us to have cognizance of the scheme of action, but not to discuss it lest we disturb its artfulness, the interdependence of its component parts, the practical force of the secret meaning of each clause. To discuss and make alterations in a labor of this kind by means of numerous votings is to impress upon it the stamp of all ratiocinations and misunderstandings which have failed to penetrate the depth and nexus of its plottings. We want our schemes to be forcible and suitably concocted. Therefore, we ought not to fling the work of genius of our guide to the fangs of the mob or even of a select company. These schemes will not turn existing institutions upside down just yet. They will only effect changes in their economy and consequently in the whole combined movement of their progress, which will thus be directed along the paths laid down in our schemes. Under various names there exists in all countries approximately one and the same thing: representation, ministry, senate, state council, legislative and executive corps. I need not explain to you the mechanism of the relation of these institutions to one another because you are aware of all that. Only take note of the fact that each of the above-named institutions corresponds to some important function of the state, and I would beg you to remark that the word important I apply not to the institution but to the function. Consequently, it is not the institutions which are important but their functions. These institutions have divided up among themselves all the functions of government: administrative, legislative, executive. Wherefore they have come to operate as do the organs in the human body. If we injure one part in the machinery of state, the state falls sick, like a human body, and will die. When we introduced into the state organism the poison of liberalism, its whole political complexion underwent a change. States have been seized with a mortal illness, blood poisoning. All that remains is to await the end of their death agony. Liberalism produced constitutional states, which took the place of what was the only safeguard of the masses, namely, despotism. And a constitution, as you well know, is nothing else but a school of discords, misunderstandings, quarrels, disagreements, fruitless party agitations, party whims. In a word, a school of everything that serves to destroy the personality of state activity. The tribune of the talkeries has, no less effectively than the press, condemned the rulers to inactivity and impotence, and thereby rendered them useless and superfluous, for which reason indeed they have been in many countries deposed. Then it was that the era of republics became possible of realization, and then it was that we replaced the ruler by a caricature of a government, by a president, taken from the mob, from the midst of our puppet creatures, our slaves. This was the foundation of the mine which we have laid under the masses, I should rather say under the Goy peoples. In the near future we shall establish the responsibility of presidents. By that time we shall be in a position to disregard forms in carrying through matters for which our impersonal puppet will be responsible. What do we care if the ranks of those striving for power should be thinned, if there should arise a deadlock from the impossibility of finding presidents, a deadlock which will finally disorganize the country? In order that our scheme may produce this result, we shall arrange elections in favor of such presidents as have in their past some dark, undiscovered stain, some Panama or other. Then they will be trustworthy agents for the accomplishment of our plans out of fear of revelations and from the natural desire of everyone who has attained power, namely the retention of the privileges, advantages, and honor connected with the office of president. The Chamber of Deputies will provide cover for, will protect, will elect presidents, but we shall take from it the right to propose new or make changes in existing laws, for this right will be given by us to the responsible president, a puppet in our hands. Naturally, the authority of the president will then become a target for every possible form of attack, but we shall provide him with a means of self-defense in the right of an appeal to the people. for the decision of the people over the heads of their representatives, that is to say, an appeal to that same blind slave of ours, the majority of the mob. Independently of this, we shall invest the President with the right of declaring a state of war. We shall justify this last right on the ground that the President, as chief of the whole army of the country, must have it at his disposal, in case of need for the defense of the new Republican Constitution, the right to defend which will belong to him as the responsible representatives this Constitution. It is easy to understand that in these conditions, the key of the shrine will lie in our hands, and no one outside ourselves will any longer direct the force of legislation. Besides this, we shall, with the introduction of the new Republican Constitution, take from the Chamber the right of interpellation on government measures, on the pretext of preserving political secrecy, and further, we shall by the new Constitution reduce the number of representatives to a minimum, thereby proportionately reducing political passions and the passion for politics. If, however, they should, which is hardly to be expected, burst into flame even in this minimum, we shall nullify them by a stirring appeal and a reference to the majority of the whole people. Upon the President will depend the appointment of presidents and vice presidents of the Chamber and the Senate. Instead of constant sessions of parliaments, we shall reduce their sittings to a few months. Moreover, the President, as chief of the executive power, will have the right to summon and dissolve Parliament, and in the latter case to prolong the time for the appointment of a new parliamentary assembly. But in order that the consequences of all these acts, which in substance are illegal, should not prematurely, for our plans, fall upon the responsibility established by us of the President, we shall instigate ministers and other officials of the higher administration about the President to evade his dispositions by taking measures of their own, for doing which they will be made the scapegoats in his place. This part we especially recommend to be given to be played by the Senate, the Council of State, or the Council of Ministers, but not to an individual official. The President will, at our discretion, interpret the sense of such of the existing laws as admit of various interpretations. He will further annul them when we indicate to him the necessity to do so. Besides this, he will have the right to propose temporary laws and even new departures in the government constitutional working, the pretext both for the one and the other being the requirements for the supreme welfare of the state. By such measures we shall obtain the power of destroying little by little, step by step, all that at the outset when we enter on our rights, we are compelled to introduce into the constitutions of states to prepare for the transition to an imperceptible abolition of every kind of constitution, and then the time has come to turn every form of government into our despotism. The recognition of our despot may also come before the destruction of the Constitution. The moment for this recognition will come when the people, utterly wearied by the irregularities and incompetence, a matter which we shall arrange for, of their rulers, will clamor, "Away with them, and give us one king over all the earth, who will unite us and annihilate the causes of discords, frontiers, nationalities, religions, state debts, who will give us peace and quiet, which we cannot find under our rulers and representatives." But you yourselves perfectly well know that to produce the possibility of the expression of such wishes by all the nations, it is indispensable to trouble in all countries the people's relations with their governments, so as to utterly exhaust humanity with dissension, hatred, struggle, envy, and even by the use of torture, by starvation, by the inoculation of diseases, by want, so that the masses see no other issue than to take refuge in our complete sovereignty in money and in all else. But if we give the nations of the world a breathing space, the moment we long for is hardly likely ever to arrive. Programmed of the new Constitution. Certain details of the proposed revolution. The masses, a pack of sheep. Secret masonry and its show lodges. The State Council has been, as it were, the emphatic expression of the authority of the ruler. It will be, as the show part of the legislative corps, what may be called the editorial committee of the laws and decrees of the ruler. This, then, is the program of the new Constitution. We shall make law, right, and justice, 1. In the guise of proposals to the legislative corps, 2. By decrees of the President under the guise of general regulations, of orders of the Senate and of resolutions of the State Council in the guise of ministerial orders, 3. And in case a suitable occasion should arise, in the form of a revolution in the state. Having established approximately the modus agendi, we will occupy ourselves with details of those combinations, by which we have still to complete the revolution in the course of the machinery of state in the direction already indicated. By these combinations I mean the freedom of the press, the right of association, freedom of conscience, the voting principle, and many another that must disappear forever from the memory of man, or undergo a radical alteration the day after the promulgation of the new Constitution. It is only at that moment that we shall be able at once to announce all our orders, for afterwards, every noticeable alteration foil be dangerous, for the following reasons. If this alteration be brought in with harsh severity, and in a sense of severity and limitations, it may lead to a feeling of despair caused by fear of new alterations in the same direction. If, on the other hand, it be brought in a sense of further indulgences, it will be said that we have recognized our own wrongdoing, and this will destroy the prestige of the infallibility of our authority, or else it will be said that we have become alarmed and are compelled to show a yielding disposition, for which we shall get no thanks because it will be supposed to be compulsory. Both the one and the other are injurious to the prestige of the new Constitution. What we want is that from the first moment of its promulgation, while the peoples of the world are still stunned by the accomplished fact of the revolution, still in a condition of terror and uncertainty, they should recognize once for all that we are so strong, so inexpugnable, so superabundantly filled with power, that in no case shall we take any account of them, and so far from paying any attention to their opinions or wishes, we are ready and able to crush with irresistible power all expression or manifestation thereof at every moment and in every place, that we have seized at once everything we wanted and shall in no case divide our power with them. Then in fear and trembling they will close their eyes to everything and be content to await what will be the end of it all. The masses are a flock of sheep, and we are their wolves. And you know what happens when the wolves get hold of the flock? There is another reason also why they will close their eyes. For we shall keep promising them to give back all the liberties we have taken away as soon as we have quelled the enemies of peace and tamed all parties. It is not worthwhile to say anything about how long a time they will be kept waiting for this return of their liberties. For what purpose, then, have we invented this whole policy and insinuated it into the minds of the Goys without giving them any chance to examine its underlying meaning? For what, indeed, if not in order to obtain in a roundabout way what is for our scattered tribe unattainable by the direct road? It is this which has served as the basis for our organization of secret masonry, which is not known to, and aims which are not even so much as suspected by, these cattle, attracted by us into the show army of Masonic lodges in order to throw dust in the eyes of their fellows. God has granted to us, his chosen people, the gift of the dispersion, and in this which appears in all eyes to be our weakness, has come forth all our strength, which has now brought us to the threshold of sovereignty over all the world. There now remains not much more for us to build up upon the foundation we have laid. Masonic interpretation of the word freedom. Future of the press in the Masonic kingdom. Control of the press. Correspondence agencies. What is progress as understood by Masonry? More about the press. Masonic solidarity in the press of today. The arousing of public demands in the provinces. Infallibility of the new regime. The word freedom, which can be interpreted in various ways, is defined by us as follows. Freedom is the right to do that which the law allows. This interpretation of the word will at the proper time be of service to us, because all freedom will thus be in our hands, since the laws will abolish or create only that which is desirable for us according to the aforesaid programmed. We shall deal with the press in the following way. What is the part played by the press today? It serves to excite and inflame those passions which are needed for our purpose, or else it serves selfish ends of parties. It is often vapid, unjust, mendacious, and the majority of the public have not the slightest idea what ends the press really serves. We shall saddle and bridle it with a tight curb. We shall do the same also with all productions of the printing press, for where would be the sense of getting rid of the attacks of the press if we remain targets for pamphlets and books? The produce of publicity, which nowadays is a source of heavy expense owing to the necessity of censoring it, will be turned by us into a very lucrative source of income to our state. We shall lay on it a special stamp tax and require deposits of caution money before permitting the establishment of any organ of the press or of printing office. These will then have to guarantee our government against any kind of attack on the part of the press. For any attempt to attack us, if such still be possible, we shall inflict fines without mercy. Such measures as stamp tax, deposit of caution money, and fines secured by these deposits will bring in a huge income to the government. It is true that party organs might not spare money for the sake of publicity, but these we shall shut up at the second attack upon us. No one shall with impunity lay a finger on the aureole of our government infallibility. The pretext for stopping any publication will be the alleged plea that it is agitating the public mind without occasion or justification. I beg you to note that among those making attacks upon us will also be organs established by us, but they will attack exclusively points that we have predetermined to alter. Not a single announcement will reach the public without our control. Even now, this is already being attained by us inasmuch as all news items are received by a few agencies, in whose offices they are focused from all parts of the world. These agencies will then be already entirely ours, and will give publicity only to what we dictate to them. If already now we have contrived to possess ourselves of the minds of the masses communities to such an extent that they all come near looking upon the events of the world through the colored glasses of those spectacles we are setting astride their noses. If already now there is not a single state where there exist for us any barriers to admittance into what masses stupidity calls state secrets. What will our position be then, when we shall be acknowledged supreme lords of the world in the person of our King of all the world? Let us turn again to the future of the printing press. Everyone desirous of being a publisher, librarian, or printer will be obliged to provide himself with the diploma instituted therefor, which, in case of any fault, will be immediately impounded. With such measures, the instrument of thought will become an educative means in the hands of our government, which will no longer allow the mass of the nation to be led astray in byways and fantasies about the blessings of progress. Is there any one of us who does not know that these phantom blessings are the direct roads to foolish imaginings which give birth to anarchical relations of men among themselves and towards authority, because progress, or rather the idea of progress, has introduced the conception of every kind of emancipation, but has failed to establish its limits. All the so-called liberals are anarchists, if not in fact at any rate in thought. Every one of them is hunting after phantoms of freedom and falling exclusively into license, that is, into the anarchy of protest for the sake of protest. We turn to the periodical press. We shall impose on it, as on all printed matter, stamp taxes per sheet and deposits of caution money, and books of less than 30 sheets will pay double. We shall reckon them as pamphlets in order on the one hand to reduce the number of magazines, which are the worst form of printed poison, and on the other, in order that this measure may force writers into such lengthy productions that they will be little read, especially as they will be costly. At the same time, what we shall publish ourselves to influence mental development in the direction laid down for our profit will be cheap and will be read voraciously. The tax will bring vapid literary ambitions within bounds, and the liability to penalties will make literary men dependent upon us. And if there should be any found who are desirous of writing against us, they will not find any person eager to print their productions. Before accepting any production for publication in print, the publisher or printer will have to apply to the authorities for permission to do so. Thus, we shall know beforehand of all tricks preparing against us and shall nullify them by getting ahead with explanations on the subject treated of literature and journalism are two of the most important educative forces, and therefore our government will become proprietor of the majority of the journals. This will neutralize the injurious influence of the privately owned press, and will put us in possession of a tremendous influence upon the public mind. If we give permits for 10 journals, we shall ourselves found 30, and so on in the same proportion. This, however, must in no wise be suspected by the public, for which reason all journals published by us will be of the most opposite in appearance, tendencies, and opinions, thereby creating confidence in us and bringing over to us our quite unsuspicious opponents who will thus fall into our trap and be rendered harmless. In the front rank will stand organs of an official character. They will always stand guard over our interests, and therefore their influence will be comparatively insignificant. In the second rank will be the semi-official organs, whose part it will be to attract the tepid and indifferent. In the third rank we shall set up our own, to all appearances, opposition, which, in at least one of its organs, will present what looks like the very antipodes to us. Our real opponents at heart will accept this simulated opposition as their own, and will show us their cards. All our newspapers will be of all possible complexions, aristocratic, republican, revolutionary, even anarchical, for so long, of course, as the Constitution exists. Like the Indian idol Vishnu, they will have 100 hands, and every one of them will have a finger on any one of the public opinions as required. When a pulse quickens, these hands will lead opinion in the direction of our aims, for an excited patient loses all power of judgment and easily yields to suggestion. Those fools who will think they are repeating the opinion of a newspaper of their own camp will be repeating our opinion or any opinion that seems desirable for us. In the vain belief that they are following the organ of their party, they will in fact follow the flag which we hang out for them. In order to direct our newspaper militia in this sense, we must take a special and minute care in organizing this material. Under the title of Central Department of the Press, we shall institute literary gatherings at which our agents will, without attracting attention, issue the orders and watchwords of the day. By discussing and controverting, but always superficially without touching the essence of the matter, our organs will carry on a sham fight fusillade with the official newspapers solely for the purpose of giving occasion for us to express ourselves more fully than could well be done from the outset in official announcements, whenever, of course, that is to our advantage. These attacks upon us will also serve another purpose, namely, that our subjects will be convinced of the existence of full freedom of speech, and so give our agents an occasion to affirm that all organs which oppose us are empty babblers, since they are incapable of finding any substantial objections to our orders. Methods of organization like these, imperceptible to the public eye but absolutely sure, are the best calculated to succeed in bringing the attention and the confidence of the public to the side of our government. Thanks to such methods, we shall be in a position, as from time to time may be required, to excite or to tranquilize the public mind on political questions, to persuade or to confuse. Printing now truth, now lies, facts, or their contradictions, according as they may be well or ill received, always very cautiously feeling our ground before stepping upon it. We shall have a sure triumph over our opponents, since they will not have at their disposition organs of the press in which they can give full and final expression to their views owing to the aforesaid methods of dealing with the press. We shall not even need to refute them, except very superficially. Trial shots like these, fired by us in the third rank of our press, in case of need, will be energetically refuted by us in our semi-official organs. Even nowadays, already, to take only the French press, there are forms which reveal Masonic solidarity in acting on the watchword. All organs of the press are bound together by professional secrecy. Like the augurs of old, not one of their numbers will give away the secret of his sources of information, unless it be resolved to make announcement of them. Not one journalist will venture to betray this secret, for not one of them is ever admitted to practice literature unless his whole past has some disgraceful sore or other. These sores would be immediately revealed. So long as they remain the secret of a few, the prestige of the journalist attracts the majority of the country. The mob follow after him with enthusiasm. Our calculations are especially extended to the provinces. It is indispensable for us to inflame there those hopes and impulses with which we could at any moment fall upon the capital, and we shall represent to the capitals that these expressions are the independent hopes and impulses of the provinces. Naturally, the source of them will be always one and the same, ours. What we need is that, until such time as we are in the plenitude of power, the capitals should find themselves stifled by the provincial opinion of the nation, that is, of a majority arranged by our agenture. What we need is that at the psychological moment the capitals should not be in a position to discuss an accomplished fact for the simple reason, if for no other, that it has been accepted by the public opinion of a majority in the provinces. When we are in the period of the new regime transitional to that of our assumption of full sovereignty, we must not admit any revelations by the press of any form of public dishonesty. It is necessary that the new regime should be thought to have so perfectly contented everybody that even criminality has disappeared. Cases of the manifestation of criminality should remain known only to their victims and to chance witnesses, no more. The need for daily bread, questions of the political, questions of industry, amusements, people's palaces. Truth is one. The great problems, the need for daily bread forces the Goyim to keep silence and be our humble servants. Agents taken onto our press from among the Goyim will at our orders discuss anything which it is inconvenient for us to issue directly in official documents, and we meanwhile quietly amid the din of the discussion so raised, shall simply take and carry through such measures as we wish and then offer them to the public as an accomplished fact. No one will dare to demand the abrogation of a matter once settled, all the more so as it will be represented as an improvement. And immediately the press will distract the current of thought towards new questions. Have we not trained people always to be seeking something new? Into the discussion of these new questions will throw themselves those of the brainless dispensers of fortunes, who are not able even now to understand that they have not the remotest conception about the matters which they undertake to discuss. Questions of the political are unattainable for any save those who have guided it already for many ages, the creators. From all this you will see that in securing the opinion of the mob, we are only facilitating the working of our machinery, and you may remark that it is not for actions but for words issued by us on this or that question that we seem to seek approval. We are constantly making public declaration that we are guided in all our undertakings by the hope, joined to the conviction that we are serving the commonweal. In order to distract people who may be too troublesome from discussions of questions of the political, we are now putting forward what we allege to be new questions of the political, namely questions of industry. In this sphere, let them discuss themselves silly. The masses are agreed to remain inactive, to take a rest from what they suppose to be political activity, which we trained them to in order to use them as a means of combating the Goy governments, only on condition of being found new employments, in which we are prescribing them something that looks like the same political object. In order that the masses themselves may not guess what they are about, we further distract them with amusements, games, pastimes, passions, people's palaces. Soon we shall begin through the press to propose competitions in art, in sport of all kinds. These interests will finally distract their minds from questions in which we should find ourselves compelled to oppose them. Growing more and more disaccustomed to reflect and form any opinions of their own, people will begin to talk in the same tone as we, because we alone shall be offering them new directions for thought, of course through such persons as will not be suspected of solidarity with us. The part played by the liberals, utopian dreamers, will be finally played out when our government is acknowledged. Till such time they will continue to do us good service. Therefore, we shall continue to direct their minds to all sorts of vain conceptions of fantastic theories, new and apparently progressive. For have we not with complete success turned the brainless heads of the Goyim with progress, will there is not among the Goyim one mind able to perceive that under this word lies a departure from truth in all cases where it is not a question of material inventions, for truth is one, and in it there is no place for progress. Progress, like a fallacious idea, serves to obscure truth so that none may know it except us, the chosen of God, its guardians. When we come into our kingdom, our orators will expound great problems which have turned humanity upside down in order to bring it at the end under our beneficent rule. Who will ever suspect then that all these peoples were staged managed by us according to a political plan which no one has so much as guessed at in the course of many centuries?